What kind of person fakes being a teacher just to humiliate someone else? Karen Wilson stormed into the community center, her heels clicking like a metronome of malice, her oversized purse swinging as if it carried the weight of her ego. The room, a modest space with flickering fluorescent lights and mismatched chairs, was filled with the soft murmur of students practicing English phrases. At the front stood Maria, a dedicated ESL tutor, her gentle voice guiding a group of immigrants through verb conjugations. Karen's eyes locked onto Maria, a smirk curling her lips. She'd overheard Maria's accented English at a coffee shop weeks ago and decided, for reasons only her spite could justify, that this woman didn't belong teaching. Karen, who'd never taught a day in her life, had a plan. Infiltrate the class, pose as an expert, and expose Maria as a fraud in front of her students. It was a cruel game, one she'd played before bullying her way into places she didn't belong, wielding her privilege like a weapon. Karen strode to the front, interrupting Maria mid-sentence. "I'm taking over today," she announced, her voice dripping with condescension. "I'm a certified ESL instructor, and I'm here to make sure you're all actually learning something." The students exchanged confused glances. Maria, her face a mask of calm professionalism, stepped aside, though her hands trembled slightly. She'd dealt with people like Karen before, entitled, loud, and eager to undermine, but never in her classroom, her sanctuary. Karen scribbled a sentence on the whiteboard. "The dog run fast." She turned, smirking, and pointed at Maria. "Correct it if you're so qualified." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Maria hesitated, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she sensed the trap. Karen's grin widened, mistaking the pause for weakness. "See? She can't even fix a simple sentence. What kind of teacher is this?" The students shifted uncomfortably, but one, a young woman named Lynn, raised her hand. Lynn, who'd fled Vietnam and learned English through sheer grit, wasn't here for games. "It's the dog runs fast," she said, her voice steady. Karen's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly, waving Lynn off. "Basic stuff. Let's try something harder." She scribbled another sentence, this one riddled with errors. "Me go store yesterday, buy apples." She turned to Maria again, her tone mocking. "Go on, expert. Fix it." Maria took a deep breath, her accent soft but clear. "It should be, I went to the store yesterday and bought apples." Karen rolled her eyes, scribbling another sentence, then another, each more convoluted, each designed to trip Maria up. But Maria answered every one, her explanations patient, precise, and correct. The students began to murmur, their unease turning to curiosity. Karen, sensing the shift, doubled down. "You're just memorizing rules," she snapped at Maria. "Real teaching requires instinct, something you clearly lack." She turned to the class, her voice booming. "I've taught for years, and I can tell you, this woman's methods are a joke." It was a lie, bold and blatant, but Karen delivered it with the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged. The students, though, weren't buying it. Ahmed, a middle-aged man from Syria, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You say you are teacher. Where you teach?" Karen froze, her mind scrambling. "Online courses," she blurted. "Very prestigious." Ahmed's brow furrowed. "Which ones?" The room grew quieter, the weight of his question hanging in the air. Karen's lie was the first crack in her facade, but she didn't see it yet. She pivoted, scribbling a complex sentence on the board. "If I was rich, I will buy a mansion." She pointed at Maria again, her voice sharp. "Correct it, or admit you're out of your depth." Maria's eyes met Karen's, steady and unafraid. "It's if I were rich, I would buy a mansion." The subjunctive mood is used for hypothetical situations. The students nodded, some jotting notes. Karen's face reddened, but she pressed on, throwing out more sentences, each one a desperate attempt to regain control. The students, however, were no longer passive. Lynn raised her hand again. "Miss Karen, why you not explain the rules? You only write wrong sentences." The question hit like a dart, sharp and unexpected. Karen stammered, her authority crumbling under the weight of Lynn's quiet defiance. Then came the twist, a moment that shifted the room's energy entirely. Javier, a shy teenager who rarely spoke, stood up, clutching a worn notebook. "I record all our lessons," he said, his voice trembling but resolute. "Miss Maria, she teach us subjunctive last week. You say it wrong, Miss Karen." He held up his phone, playing a clip of Maria's voice, clear and confident, explaining the very rule Karen had fumbled. The students gasped, their eyes darting between Javier's phone and Karen's stunned face. Maria's lessons, recorded for practice, were now a weapon of truth. Karen's plan to humiliate Maria had backfired, exposing her own ignorance instead. The room buzzed with whispers, the students' respect for Maria growing, their distrust of Karen solidifying. She wasn't a teacher, she was a fraud, and they knew it now. Karen's hands shook as she gripped the marker, her smugness replaced by a flicker of panic. The students' eyes were on her now, not with the deference she'd expected, but with skepticism. Javier's recording had changed everything, a quiet bombshell that turned the tables. Maria stood silently, her composure unshaken, but her eyes held a spark of vindication. Karen, desperate to regain control, forced a laugh. "That's just one rule," she said, her voice higher than before. "Let's see how you handle something advanced." She scribbled a new sentence on the whiteboard. "The committee meets tomorrow. They decides on the budget." She turned, her chin raised, daring Maria to falter. Maria stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "It's the committee meets tomorrow, and they decide on the budget. The subject, they, requires the base form of the verb in the present tense." The students nodded, some whispering to each other, their confidence in Maria growing. Karen's face twisted, her frustration boiling over. "You're just parroting textbooks," she snapped. "Real teaching is about engaging students, not boring them with rules." It was a weak deflection, and the students saw through it. Ahmed spoke again, his voice steady but pointed. "Miss Maria engage us. She make us write stories, talk about our lives. What you do, Miss Karen, you only make mistakes." The room erupted in murmurs of agreement, a chorus of voices that Karen hadn't anticipated. She'd underestimated these students, assuming their limited English meant limited perception. She was wrong. Lynn, emboldened, stood up. "Miss Karen, you say you teach online. Show us your lessons. I want to see." The challenge was direct, and Karen's heart sank. She had no lessons, no credentials, nothing but her own arrogance. "I don't need to prove anything to you," she spat, but her voice wavered. The students weren't backing down. Javier, still holding his phone, spoke up. "Miss Maria give us her certificate. It's on the wall. Where's yours?" He pointed to a framed document behind Maria's desk, a modest but legitimate ESL teaching certification. Karen's eyes darted to it, then away, her mind racing for an excuse. "Certificates don't mean anything," she muttered, but the words sounded hollow even to her. The confrontation was escalating, and Karen felt the walls closing in. She'd come here to humiliate Maria, to assert her dominance, but the students were dismantling her lie with every question. Then came another twist, one that hit harder than Javier's recording. Lynn pulled out her phone, her fingers moving quickly. "I search your name, Miss Karen. No teacher profile. But I find this." She held up an article from a local blog, its headline damning, "Local Woman Disrupts Community Events with False Claims." The post detailed Karen's history of crashing events, charity drives, book clubs, even a cooking class claiming expertise she didn't have, only to cause chaos and leave. The students gasped, passing the phone around, their whispers turning to outrage. Karen's face drained of color. She hadn't expected her past to follow her here, exposed by a student's quick thinking. "You're lying," Karen shouted, her voice cracking. "That's fake news." But the students weren't listening. They were rallying around Maria, their loyalty fierce. Ahmed stood, his voice booming. "You come here to make trouble. You disrespect Miss Maria. Disrespect us. We learn English to build our lives. You think this is a game. The room was electric now, the students united, their voices rising. Maria, who'd been silent, finally spoke. Karen, you don't need to do this. Teaching is about helping, not hurting. Why are you here? The question was simple, but it cut deep. Karen had no answer, only anger. She grabbed her purse, ready to storm out, but Lynn blocked her path. You owe Miss Maria an apology, she said, her voice unwavering. Karen's eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but the student's stares pinned her in place. She'd walked into this room thinking she could control it, but she'd underestimated the power of people fighting for their dignity. The confrontation was no longer just about grammar, it was about truth, about respect, about the community Karen had tried to tear apart. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. For the first time, she felt small, exposed, her arrogance stripped away by the very people she'd dismissed. The room seemed to shrink around Karen, the walls echoing with the students' righteous anger. She clutched her purse, her knuckles white, her face a mask of defiance crumbling under the weight of their scrutiny. Lynn stood firm, her demand for an apology hanging in the air like a verdict. Karen's lips parted, but instead of remorse, she spat venom. You think you can judge me? I don't owe any of you anything. The words were meant to wound, but they only fueled the student's resolve. Maria stepped forward, her voice soft but unyielding. You're wrong, Karen. You owe these students respect. They're here to learn, to grow, and you tried to take that from them. The words hit like a quiet thunderclap, and for a moment, even Karen seemed to falter. But her pride was too stubborn. She turned to leave, shoving past Lynn, but Ahmed blocked the door. You don't walk away, he said, his voice low and steady. You answer for this. Karen's eyes widened, realizing she was trapped not just by the students, but by the consequences of her own actions. The community center's director, Mrs. Patel, had been alerted by the noise and entered the room, her expression stern. She'd heard enough from the hallway to piece together the chaos. What's going on here? She demanded. Lynn, ever the leader, stepped forward, holding up her phone with the blog post. This woman pretend to be teacher. She lie. She disrespect Miss Maria. Mrs. Patel's eyes narrowed as she scanned the article, then turned to Karen. Is this true? Karen stammered, her lies unraveling faster than she could spin them. I was just trying to help, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Mrs. Patel wasn't fooled. You disrupted a class, misrepresented yourself, and harassed a qualified instructor. That's not help, that's harm. She pulled out her phone, dialing the local police non-emergency line. We have a policy against fraud and disruption. You'll need to explain this to the authorities. Karen's face went pale, her bravado collapsing. The students watched, silent but resolute, as Mrs. Patel escorted her to the office to wait for the police. Karen's downfall was swift, a legal reckoning for her reckless deception. The community center filed a formal complaint, and Karen faced charges for misrepresentation and disorderly conduct, a public humiliation that would follow her far longer than her fleeting moment of power. As the door closed behind her, the room exhaled. Maria turned to her students, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'm sorry you had to see that, she said, her voice trembling. Lynn shook her head. No, Miss Maria, you teach us more than English. You teach us to stand up. The students nodded, some reaching out to touch her arm, a gesture of solidarity. Javier, still clutching his notebook, smiled shyly. We protect you, like you protect us. The words broke something in Maria, and she smiled, a mix of gratitude and pride. The class resumed, but it was different now, stronger, bonded by their shared victory. In the weeks that followed, the students turned their anger into action. They wrote letters to the community center, praising Maria's teaching and demanding more support for ESL programs. Lynn organized a fundraiser to buy new textbooks, and Ahmed shared his story at a local council meeting, advocating for immigrant education. Their voices, once hesitant, now rang with confidence, inspired by the courage they'd found in that classroom. Maria, too, grew stronger, her quiet resilience a beacon for her students. Karen's attempt to tear them down had only built them up, proving that truth and unity could outshine even the loudest lies. The story of that day spread through the community, a tale of ordinary people standing against arrogance, of students defending their teacher with the very skills she'd given them. It wasn't just a victory over Karen, it was a testament to the power of learning, of community, of fighting for what's right. Maria's classroom became a symbol of hope, a place where voices, no matter how accented, could rise and be heard. And somewhere, Karen sat alone, her name now synonymous with a lesson she'd never intended to teach. That cruelty, when met with courage, always falls.